Good evening, students. Welcome back to class. Now, in our previous lecture, we were talking about Harshavardhan and कई aspects of his rule we had discussed. Next, बचता क्या है? Harsha's administration. Now, Harsha modeled his administration on the basis of which great imperial power? Gupta administration. Okay. So superficially, the features of Harsha's administration are going to resemble those of Gupta administration. This is going to be reflected in the structure of the government, the theoretical position of the king, how he organizes his cabinet, the nomenclature of the officials. वो काफी सारा Gupta administration के साथ मिलता जुलता होगा. According to both the Harshcharita as well as Sang, Harsha exercised absolute control over his vast empire. He personally supervised administration, especially the administration of justice, for which he organized lengthy royal tours, which he used to travel across the length and breadth of his empire, dispensing justice wherever he went. He also maintained a large army which was essential for subduing the local elements, and thus, at least superficially, according to the Harshcharita and Sang, Harsha's administration seems to have a high degree of centralization. But if we look beneath the surface, in practical terms, the degree of centralization seems to be significantly lesser than the Gupta period. On the basis of inscriptions of Harsha's period, it becomes clear that there was a long list of feudal lords who were involved in local administration. So within the feudal system also there was intermediation, there was stratification. These inscriptions also reveal that many regions of Harsha's empire, including both the frontier regions as well as the core regions, were not directly administered by him. Rather, they were administered by local hereditary chiefs. Further, during Harsha's period, we also witness the rapid decline of trade and commerce, crafts production, monetization, and urbanization. This is reflected in the writings, particularly of Sang, who talks about the dilapidated state of prominent Buddhist sites such as Kapilvastu, Lumbini, Shravasti, Ayodhya, etc. Right? And generally, these are characteristics associated with which socio-economic and political system? High centralization or high feudalism? High feudalism and decentralization. Thirdly, what was Harsha's army being used for? Was it being used only for territorial expansion, or also a prominent role was the suppression of the local elements? Both. In fact, जो internal use था army का, that was much more frequent than when it came to external expansion. So Harsha frequently used his army to pacify his own territory. A ruler who has to frequently use his army to subjugate his own people, do you think he enjoys a high degree of control, or is his grasp over the power a weak one, a tenuous one? Weak and tenuous grasp on power. So this indicates a relatively weaker or more tenuous grasp on power. Further, unlike periods where the degree of royal control was usually high, what kind of laws do we see? Extremely harsh laws or milder laws? Milder laws, क्योंकि उतना degree of control जरूरत नहीं होती है. The state already has a minimum amount of support among the population that it tries to modify its laws in order to make life more, you can say, comfortable for its subjects, so that the link between the population and the ruling class can become even stronger. But that is possible only after the state has already established a certain degree of control over the population. In the case of Harsha, what do we see? According to Sang, the laws within Harsha's empire, were they mild or extremely strict? Extremely strict. In contrast, during the Gupta age, the penal code seemed to be quite mild. This indicates a relative decline in the degree of control enjoyed by Harsha over his own subjects. Further, while it has been pointed out that according to Sang, Harsha maintained a large and powerful army, we also have some contradictory information that there was an element of military weakness or limitation, as indicated by Harsha's inability to defeat Shashank during his lifetime, right? It was only after Shashank's death that Harsha and Bhaskar Varman combined their forces to annex God and divide it among them. It is also reflected in Harsha's inability to cross the Vindhyas and defeat the Chalukyas to expand towards the south. It is also reflected in his inability to annex the regions of Sindh, Kashmir, and Gujarat in his empire, right? So there were some limitations to his military strength, and since military is a very important component of royal control, the weakness of the military also betrays weakness of royal control. So degree of royal control was also lesser. Okay. So on the basis of this, it has been argued that Harsha's administration, while it had some elements of centralization and centralizing tendencies, on the whole, the degree of royal authority exercised by the ruler was much lesser than the preceding periods. Further, एक और चीज हम पॉइंट आउट कर सकते हैं, हर्षा, unlike the Guptas or the Mauryans, was unable to give a proper institutional shape to his administrative machinery. What was the result of this? Harsha's state lacked the degree of permanence that is necessary for establishing a long-lasting empire. And as a result, as soon as Harsha died, his empire also collapsed completely. It shattered into its various feudal components. Okay? So it was a short-lived empire. And पीछे इसके रीजन क्या है? That there was no institutional permanence to administration. And when there is no institutionalization of administration, the degree of royal control is necessarily going to be lesser in comparison to institutionalized administrative mechanisms. ठीक है? So एक हमने theoretical picture देखा है, एक practical picture देखा है. Write down. The administration of Harshavardhan has invited a great degree of historical attention. Has invited a great degree of historical attention. Has invited a great degree of historical attention. Full stop. The same point continue. K.M. Panikkar. K.M. Panikkar has opined that Harsha governed over a vast empire covering the whole of North India with an iron grip. With an iron grip. Full stop. Next point. This opinion is largely based on the writings of Banbhat and Huensang. Banbhat and Huensang. Full stop. According to them, Harsha's administration was a highly centralized one, in which the king enjoyed absolute power. The king enjoyed absolute power. Subpoint. According to Huensang, comma, Harsha personally supervised the administration of the state and did not rely heavily on bureaucrats of the state and did not rely heavily on bureaucrats. Did not rely heavily on bureaucrats. Next subpoint. He further informs us that the king constantly toured across the length and breadth of his empire, in order to administer justice, and check the abuse of power by local officials. Next subpoint. Further, Harsha maintained a large army consisting of 5 lakh infantry, 1 lakh cavalry, and 60,000 elephants. Full stop. Naturally, to raise such an army would have required immense resources, indicating the presence of a centralized revenue system. Next subpoint. Simultaneously, Harsha's large army must definitely have enhanced his royal supremacy within the kingdom. Next subpoint. According to Banbhatt's Harshcharita, Harsha maintained a large cabinet of ministers known as the Mantri Parishad. Known as the Mantri Parishad. Full stop. Its members included A B C D करके लिख सकते हो. A, महासंधि विग्रह का कौन होता था ये? दी फॉरेन मिनिस्टर. हाइफन करके फॉरेन मिनिस्टर कर लो. दी बी, दी महाबलाधिकृत. BALADHIKRIT. He was the commander in chief. C, न्याय करने का. It is chief justice. The Bhandagar Adhikrita. That is the chief revenue official. D, Bhandagar Adhikrita, chief revenue official. E, the Mahapratihar. He was the head of the palace guard. Head of the palace guard. F, Mahaakshpatalika. Was the chief record keeper. Chief record keeper. ठीक है. Next sub point. Additionally, comma, the Harsharita mentions the presence of a large number of civil servants employed by the state at different levels of administration. Full stop. The civil service was headed by junior ministers known as Kumaramatya. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो और एक सब पॉइंट और इसमें लिख लो. द प्रेजेंस ऑफ अ लार्ज रॉयल ब्यूरोक्रेसी, द प्रेजेंस ऑफ अ लार्ज रॉयल ब्यूरोक्रेसी is also indicative of the high degree of central control, of the high degree of central control, of the high degree of central control. Okay. Now, next main point. Later historians such as R.C. Majumdar, followed by D.D. Kosambi, have criticized K.M. Panikkar's analysis. K.M. Panikkar's analysis. According to them, while Harsha's administration was modeled after Gupta administration in theory, there were significant limitations to the level of despotism and central control. There were significant limitations to the degree of despotism and central control. Full stop. Subpoint. Harsha's inscriptions reveal the presence of a large number of feudatories not only spread horizontally across his empire, but vertically inserted into administration, especially at local levels. Full stop. Next subpoint. It appears from these inscriptions that many regions of Harsha's empire including both the frontier regions as well as the core regions, were governed by local feudatories. Not only in frontier regions but also in core regions there was absence of royal authority and a great degree of autonomy enjoyed by the local feudal elements. Example, copper plate inscriptions from Kannauj refer to land grants made to Brahmin priests by whom? कन्नौज का सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है हर्षा के लिए? इट वॉज द कैपिटल ऑफ हिज वास्ट एम्पायर. यहाँ पे स्पेशली इंस्क्रिप्शन, जो डोनेटिव इंस्क्रिप्शन, जितने भी डोनेशन कर रहे हैं, अगर हाईली सेंट्रलाइज्ड एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन होता तो कौन कर रहा होगा? द किंग डायरेक्टली, राइट, बिकॉज ही ओन्स ऑल द लैंड. बट देखने के लिए क्या मिलता है? इट इज नॉट द किंग, रादर इट इज अ लोकल फ्यूडल लॉर्ड विद द टाइटल महासामंत. ठीक है. तो क्या लिखा है? टू ब्राह्मण प्रीस्ट्स बाय a local feudatory with the title Mahasamant. With the title Mahasamant. ठीक है. This indicates that even in the vicinity of his imperial capital, Harsha's rule was not absolute. Harsha's rule was not absolute. Full stop. Local feudatories enjoyed a great degree of autonomy and discretion. A great degree of autonomy and discretion. Okay. And discretion. हर चीज के लिए राजा से परमिशन लेने की जरूरत नहीं है. Many things that was up to their decision making ability. Next sub point लिखो. Further, local administration appears to be practically independent of central control. Appear to be practically independent of central control. Why are we saying this? कि अगर provincial गवर्नमेंट में हाई लेवल ऑफ सेंट्रलाइजेशन होता, व्हाट वुड वी सी? जितने भी ऑफिशियल्स हैं दे वुड बी अपॉइंटेड बाय द किंग, द सेंटर. बट देखने के लिए क्या मिल रहा है? दे आर नॉट बीइंग अपॉइंटेड बाय द किंग, रादर बाय द प्रोविंशियल गवर्नर्स. राइट डाउन. कुमार अमात्यास at the provincial level and ayuktas at the district level who functioned as the common link between the state and its subjects were not appointed by the king at all. Between the state and its subjects, were not appointed, state and its subjects, were not appointed by the king at all. To stop. Rather, they appear to be appointed by the local governors. By the local governors. ठीक है. Next sub point. Similarly, comma, there appears to be a rising trend of the presence of hereditary officials in local administration. In local administration. This, full stop, this is further proof of declining. This is further proof of declining centralization. Next sub point. Lastly, while some officials were paid in the form of cash salaries, comma, all senior officials were paid in the form of what? Hereditary land grants. Hereditary land grants. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. Harsha's period was characterized by declining trade, crafts production, monetization, and urbanization. All these are declining. ठीक है. Declining trade, crafts production, declining monetization, declining urbanization. Full stop. Sub point. Generally, such economic changes coincide with rising feudalism and decentralization. ठीक है. Next main point. Huensang reports that Harsha had to frequently use his army to suppress local uprisings. Full stop. Next main point. Additionally, comma, the mild penal system of the Gupta age was replaced by an extremely severe set of punishments, comma, even for minor crimes, extremely severe forms of punishment, even for minor crimes. सब पॉइंट लिखो. It is generally seen that states which enjoy a high degree of control, tend to move away from the draconian measures, of military might, and strict punishments to assert control. Next subpoint. Instead, they seek to strengthen the relationship with the subject population through welfare and ideological means. Full stop. Next subpoint. Harsha's use of coercive power to assert sovereignty indicates a sense of insecurity due to his tenuous grasp on power. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. फर्दर, comma, recent historiography has also raised doubts with regards to Harsha's military might and its effectiveness and the effectiveness of the military as an instrument of despotism. Full stop. Subpoint. His military limitations are indicated by A, B, C करके. A, his inability to control or inability to conquer the whole of North India. B, his failed invasion of the Deccan. And C, his inability to suppress frequent internal rebellions. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. It has also been emphasized that Harsha was unable to provide a solid institutional base to his administrative machinery. The point. Therefore, his state lacked the permanence which is typical of highly centralized empires. Full stop. Next point. It is precisely because of this impermanence that Harsha's state proved to be a short-lived one. Full stop. It died along with him. Clear है? Take down a question. Examine the nature of Harshavardhan's administration. Full stop. To what extent did it exhibit the element of royal absolutism and centralization? Question mark. Next question. To what degree was Harsha's administration a continuation of Gupta administration? Next question. Highlight the role of administrative factors in the disintegration of Harshvardhan's empire. $250 words, 200 words, 150 words. कहीं पे दिक्कत होगी तो बताइए. If you want me to elaborate on anything. क्या क्या? Administrative factors in the disintegration of Harsha's empire. Over here, we need to highlight the nature of the state. क्या देखा है हमने? While superficially it appears to be a highly centralized state in which the ruler enjoys complete authority, but in the actual sense, there are major limitations to centralization. Including the high degree of local autonomy enjoyed by local officials, the presence of a large number of hierarchically arranged feudal elements, the presence of feudalism also in local administration, which was strengthened further through the policy of paying officials in the form of land grants. The absence of royal absolute control, not only in the peripheral regions but also in the core regions of the empire. According to Harshcharita's own administration, many living kings had accepted the overlordship of Harsha but enjoyed complete autonomy within their own kingdoms. Further, from the contemporary sources such as inscriptions, we also see indications of military weakness and revenue decentralization, along with the decentralization of the bureaucracy as well, since local officials were either feudal hereditary officials or appointed handpicked by the local governors. We are saying that this is a region, an autonomous region, इसको आप province consider कर सकते हो, right? Over here, the most dominant official is going to be the provincial governor. Now, when royal control or despotism is high, तो provincial governor का nature क्या होगा? He is going to be appointed by the king. He could be removed at any point by the king. He could be transferred from one place to another. He could even be punished by the king. The degree of authority exercised by him free of royal control is going to be significantly lesser. He is not going to be a hereditary official. He is going to be a appointed official. He is going to be surrounded by a council of ministers who have the authority to bypass him and report directly to the king on important matters. The king would also have the authority to appoint special administrators to oversee specific items of administration in the provinces, and the provincial governor could not intervene. The provincial bureaucracy would be responsible to both the provincial governor as well as the king. So the king could intervene in matters of local administration by transferring even the local level officials or by dismissing them or promoting them. He could also make special instructions for the local officials. But in case of Harshvardhan, what do we see? most of these local officials were not royal princes. They were not related to the king in any manner. Rather, these were local autonomous rulers who simply recognized the overlordship of Harshvardhan. Okay? So they were not provincial governors in the true sense, rather they were local vassals of the king. Okay? Now the ministers around them, as well as the local officials, they are also not going to be subject to royal oversight. Rather, they would be answerable to the local governor. And in most cases, ये होंगे कौन? These are the feudatories of the local governor. They were either the sub-feudatories of the local officials. So we are talking about individuals such as Kumar, Amatyas or Ayuktas, or officials appointed by the local ruler. Okay? And how would these officials appointed by the local rulers be paid? Once again, primarily in the form of land grants rather than cash salaries. So while some feudatories would be given the position of local officials, some local officials would be handpicked and sent to various regions, especially the frontier regions or the strategically important regions, which are more difficult to tame, and they would be raised to the level of sub-feudatories by these local officials. And as a result, in various regions, a pyramidal distribution of power emerged, with the local ruler or the local vassal being at the top, and he would be supported by his own set of feudatories as well as their sub-feudatories and their sub-feudatories in a reciprocal loyalty network. इस लेवल के जो फ्यूडल लॉर्ड्स होंगे, फ्यूडल ऑफिशियल्स, लैंड होल्डर्स होंगे, दे वुड डिपेंड ऑन द फ्यूडल लॉर्ड्स ऑफ दिस लेवल टू कंफर्म देयर hereditary rights and titles, to confirm their privileges. The feudatories at this level would have the same relationship as the people at this level. यहाँ का यहाँ वाले के साथ, यहाँ का यहाँ वाले के साथ. And a similar relationship would be maintained between the local ruler at the top with Harshvardhan. But since in this entire region, the local ruler is ruling on behalf of the king, therefore the element of decentralization is going to be quite pronounced. As a result of this, Harsha's empire was not in fact a true empire. Rather, it was a loose confederacy of local rulers who had been subjugated by Harshvardhan. What attitude do you think they had towards Harshvardhan and his control? Do you think they would welcome it? no, natural tendency would be to break free. And as soon as Harshavardhan died, because he had been unable to fundamentally change the nature of his state, even though he tried to do so from the beginning to the end, it largely remained the same. It largely remained unchanged. That is why, as soon as the linchpin, that is the ruler himself, Harshavardhan, was no longer in the scene, the highly centrifugal forces led to the splintering of his empire. ठीक है, तो these are the administrative factors in the decline of Harsha's empire. तो वही वाली चीजें हैं जो हमने पहले डिस्कस करी हैं, उसको आपको यहाँ पे रीपैकेज करके लिखना होगा. ठीक है, the words that you use will have to be chosen carefully for this purpose. अभी समझ में आया है? ये वाला हो जाएगा. अबाउट दिस वन एंड दिस वन हो जाएंगे. चलिए, तो ये हो गया हर्षवर्धन. नाउ when it comes to the post Gupta age, another very important aspect is the history of the Chalukyas and Pallavas. यहाँ पे हमें कवर क्या क्या करना है? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, the process of state formation in peninsular India during the post-Gupta period, and which resulted in the emergence of Chalukyas and Pallavas and the conflict between them. Secondly, you can be asked about the administration of these kingdoms, especially their comparison to the Gupta Empire. Okay. Thirdly, we need to study the economy of peninsular India during the post-Gupta age under the Chalukyas and Pallavas. And यहाँ पे एक स्पेसिफिक टॉपिक हमको कवर करना है ज्यादा अटेंशन दे करके, दैट इज द रोल ऑफ nadus and nagarams in facilitating the revival of urbanization in the deep south under the Pallavas. In the second urbanization of South India. Then, when it comes to the religion and society, once again our focus is going to be primarily on the deep south, Pallavas, and over there the most important theme that we'll be covering is that of the emergence of Tamil Bhakti, factors responsible for its emergence, its features, its evolution, etc. And finally, we'll be talking about the artistic and literary contributions of the Chalukyas and Pallavas. Right. First of all, process of state formation and Pallava-Chalukya conflict. So, see, तो ये एम्पायर्स इमर्ज कहां पर हुए? Pallavas in the deep south, that is some parts of Andhra Pradesh, a major portion of Tamil Nadu, and certain parts of Kerala as well. ठीक है, तो इससे थोड़ा और ज्यादा इतना, ठीक है. And what about the Chalukyas? They established a vast empire controlling large portions of Maharashtra, parts of Andhra Pradesh, and also Karnataka. The capital of the Chalukyas was Badami or Vatapi in Karnataka, whereas that of the Pallavas was Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu. Now, state formation in the Deccan region had started as early as the 1st century BC. The first empire to emerge in the Deccan region was that of the Satavahanas. Their control over the Deccan lasted for almost 400 years before their disintegration, resulting in the emergence of the relatively shorter-lived Ikshvaku dynasty, who were themselves overcome by the Vakatakas, and it was the disintegration of the Vakataka rule over the Deccan that created the space finally for the emergence of the Chalukyas. When? In the 6th century CE. Okay. It was roughly at the same time that a new power in the deep south consolidated control after emerging from the political chaos that was going on ever since the end of the Sangam age. So Cheras, Cholas, Pallavas, Pandyas they were fighting against each other. The Pallavas were initially underlings, feudatories of the Pandyas. They first overcame their own masters and then also suppressed the Cheras and the Cholas, thus establishing complete control over the region of Tamil Nadu and began to expand further. Okay? Now, as a result of the consolidation of these two powerful kingdoms or empires, whatever you'd like to call them, a conflict between them was a natural outcome. Why were they fighting? They wanted control of the fertile regions of the Raichur Doab, the Kaveri Plains, and the Krishna Godavari Delta. Right? क्यों लड़ रहे थे? They were fighting primarily because of material factors. But due to the peculiar nature of politics during this phase, this conflict did not simply remain an economic conflict. It took the shape of a religious and dynastic conflict. Okay? Now, was the conflict between the Chalukyas and Pallavas unique to the geography that we are talking about, or was this part of the normal pattern of historical development? Normal pattern. इसके बाद the same conflict is going to emerge between the Cholas to the south and Rashtrakutas to the north. इसके बाद the same thing is also going to be visible in the case of the Vijayanagar and Bahmani kingdoms, right? And वहां पे भी क्या दिखेगा? It was driven primarily by material factors, but took the shape of a religious and dynastic conflict. ठीक है? And तो ये जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है, इसके कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स और फैक्टर्स समझना काफी जरूरी हो जाता है, राइट? एंड the very fact that ever since the emergence of these two kingdoms, they had been fighting constantly against each other. Their political systems had themselves been shaped by war. In fact, the very fact that these empires were products of warfare also gives us certain insights into the process of state formation itself. What were the important factors responsible for state formation in peninsular India during the post-Gupta age? First of all, this was a period of expanding agriculture. इसकी वजह से होगा क्या? Large surplus would be generated, thus resulting in the emergence of the potentiality to sustain a local state. ठीक है? It would also equip with the rulers with a large military who would use it in order to consolidate royal control. Thirdly, the spread of Brahmanism in peninsular India during this period, especially in the deep south, also contributed to the process of state formation. How? Because with Brahmanism was also introduced the ideological, you can say, trappings of northern ideals of kingship. The Brahmanical model of kingship was quite distinct from the model of kingship in the deep south. Deep south में during the Sangam period, what was the position of the rulers? That of the most dominant tribal chief. लेकिन वो था tribal chief ही, सबसे ज्यादा powerful वाला वो होगा, but he was considered to be first among equals. And Brahmanical ideals के हिसाब से king का position क्या है? It is that of the absolute monarch. So ideological means for Power centralization and state consolidation also became available to the local rulers with the onset of Brahmanism in the deep south. Further, land grants would play an extremely important role in the process of state formation. Kaise? This would become the means not only for the kings to expand the area under their control, to enhance the social base and the taxpayer base of their empire, but also through the spread of Brahmanism to incorporate as much of the local population within their state structure as possible. And finally, through bhakti, the process of state formation was also facilitated. Kaise? Bhakti was the most popular religious cult at this point of time, and therefore it was deliberately patronized and promoted by the state. This allowed the state to culturally align itself with the common people and thus to absorb them into the state system. Okay? This is what Bhakti allowed the kings to do. Now, give the heading Pallavas and Chalukyas and एक छोटा सा introduction लिख लो. लिखो. It would not be incorrect to state that the strength and vigor state that the strength and vigor of Indian history lay south of the Vindhyas, between 500 and 750 CE. It would not be incorrect to state that the strength and vigor of Indian history lay south of the Vindhyas between 500 and 750 CE. Why are we saying this? 750, 500 से 750, 750 CE. Why are we saying this? Likho. Sub point. Firstly, after the decline of the Gupta Empire, North India का politics कैसा हो गया था? It presented a picture of fragmentation. The politics of North India, the Gupta Empire, the politics of North India presented a picture of political fragmentation characterized by rising feudalism, falling trade, demonetization, and deurbanization. Falling trade, demonetization, and deurbanization. During this period, did any rulers attempt to reverse this trend and establish large empires? 500 से 750 के बीच में नॉर्थ इंडिया में कोई बड़ा रूलर हुआ ही नहीं. हुआ हर्षवर्धन हुआ, यशोवर्मन हुआ, ललितादित्य हुआ, राइट. सब पॉइंट लिखो. नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट. Although some rulers like Harshvardhan tried to arrest This decline, comma, their efforts were largely abortive in nature. So after then, the entire process of centralization and revival of trade, commerce, urbanization, they were all aborted. They were all abandoned. Next point, likho. On the other hand, comma, two big empires appeared south of the Vindhyas during this period. कौन? Pallavas or Chalukyas. Next point. Apart from their political achievements, comma, this region also witnessed significant socio-economic and cultural growth. ABC करके लिखो इसके नीचे. A, कैसे सोशियो इकोनॉमिक एंड कल्चरल ग्रोथ का पीरियड था ये? सबसे पहला, डीप साउथ में सेकेंड अर्बनाइजेशन हो रहा था. राइट डाउन. दिस वाज द पीरियड ऑफ सेकेंड अर्बनाइजेशन in the deep south. B, it was also a period when Tamil Bhakti emerged as a massive popular movement. तो इकोनॉमी में भी, सोसाइटी एंड रिलीजन में भी डेवलपमेंट हो रहा है. राइट. नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट नंबर सी लिखो. फर्दर, comma, this period also witnessed the emergence of a new Tamil identity. How or why? पुरानी तमिल आइडेंटिटी चेंज क्यों होगी अब इस समय? सेकेंड अर्बनाइजेशन वगैरह तो हो रहा है. एट दिस पीरियड नॉर्थ के साथ कांटेक्ट और नॉर्थ का इन्फ्लुएंस भी यहाँ पे ज्यादा बढ़ने लगा. फॉर एग्जांपल ये सी ना कि ब्राह्मणिज्म का बहुत मेजर राइज होगा इस समय यहाँ पर. राइट. एज अ रिजल्ट सम ब्राह्मणिकल ट्रेट्स आर गोइंग टू बी अब्सॉर्ब्ड, लेकिन उसका एक काउंटर रिएक्शन भी होगा. क्या लिखा आपने अभी? हाँ, न्यू तमिल आइडेंटिटी ड्यू टू द स्प्रेड ऑफ नॉर्दर्न कल्चर. The new identity was both the result of and a reaction to, or a reaction against, Cultural diffusion from the north. Cultural diffusion from the north. ठीक है. और इन कॉन्ट्रास्ट नॉर्थ इंडिया में क्या देखने के लिए मिल रहा है? Decline of the economy, decline of urbanization, decline of trade and craft, decline of exchange, growing social rigidity, social stagnation, the crystallization of the varna and caste structure, etc. Decline of great empires, political fragmentation, right? So economy में, polity में, society में, everything is slowing down, everything is cooling off. Or south of the Vindhyas, everything is rising. Does this statement? Now take down the question. The strength and vigor of Indian history between 500 to 750 CE lay south of the Vindhyas. Full stop. Discuss. $200 words. हो जाएगा. स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड जो अभी हमने डिस्कस किया वही बताना है यहाँ पर. बट इफ क्वेश्चन वाज discuss critically, would you be writing the same answer? No, completely different answer लिखना पड़ता है उसमें, right? And अब क्या करना पड़ेगा? इसके अगेंस्ट काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट्स भी देने पड़ेंगे, राइट? सो यू विल हैव टू शो हाउ सोशली, पॉलिटिकली, इकोनॉमिकली, इन द फील्ड ऑफ रिलीजन एटसेट्रा, नॉर्थ इंडिया में स्टिल क्वाइट सिग्निफिकेंट एक्टिविटी चल रहा था, राइट? सो to discuss it critically, we would have to offer counter arguments. For example, politically क्या बोल सकते हैं हम? We can highlight the role played by prominent and powerful rulers such as Harshavardhana, Yashovarman of Kannauj, Lalitaditya of Kashmir, who not only established large empires with strong militaries but also won significant victories and introduced sound administrative measures. It was during this period that the Hunas were finally repelled from India. ठीक है? Economically, we can point towards the writings of Huan Sang, who has talked at length about the flourishing state of cities in North India, such as Kannauj and Prayagraj. He also reports the extensive foreign and local trade across North India. Right? Similarly, we can also not dismiss the benefits of the end of Huna invasions. Which would definitely have helped in a better connectivity with India's western neighbors. And further, we should also keep in mind that following the Arab conquest of Sindh, कब हुआ ये? 711, 712 CE. Direct connectivity between India and the Islamic Caliphate was established, which gave a major boost to trade and commerce. India was once again connected to the international superhighway of trade, that is the Silk Route. Okay? Further, when it comes to culture, what do we see? Harshavardhan, sorry, Huensang कैसा पिक्चर पेंट करता है? A picture of cultural deprivation or active cultural creation? Active cultural creation. Why? Due to an open and secular society, a tolerant religious policy by the state, and the state's direct patronage to scholars, artists, and religious figures, etc. Okay? Further, if we look at the development of education, this period was extremely significant. Huensang once again talks about the status of Nalanda as the most important center of learning in the whole of the world. It attracted more than 10,000 students and over 1,000 teachers from different parts of the world. As far away as China and Korea also people were coming. Southeast Asia से लोग आ रहे थे, Central Asia से आ रहे थे पढ़ने के लिए. Further, the Palas also during the post-Gupta and early medieval age would establish several important Buddhist institutions of learning, such as the Udantpuri monastery, the Vikramshila Buddhist Mahavihar, the Jagdalla Buddhist Mahavihar, and finally the Somapura Buddhist Mahavihar. It was also during this period that Jain learning received a major boost with the establishment of a major center of learning at Vallabhi in Gujarat under the Maitrikas. And Brahmanical education also received a major boost in North India with the establishment of the Sharda Peeth in present day Pakistan occupied Kashmir under the influence of the Karkota dynasty of Kashmir. Okay? So education में भी North India was progressing leaps and bounds. Then in the field of religion, do we see stagnancy or do we see growth? Change, evolution, growth. Religion में two major trends are going to emerge as the most popular within the people of among the people of North India. These would be bhakti and tantricism. While they had started emerging during the Gupta age itself, final form कब लेंगे ये? Post Gupta age में, right? On the basis of this analysis, it would be wrong to say that the strength and vigor of Indian history during this period lay south of the Vindhyas. While it cannot be denied कि south of the Vindhyas बहुत major developments हो रहे थे, and while some elements of decline were visible in North Indian life, it would be wrong to say that the balance of power had completely shifted towards the south. Okay? And then we can also critique the basic paradigm of this question. The strength and vigor of Indian history lying in South India during this period. ये वेरी प्रेडिकेट जो ये फ्रेमवर्क है, इसी को हम चैलेंज कर सकते हैं कि ये वैलिड है भी या नहीं. Strength and vigor of Indian history, is it something that can be ascribed to a particular region or not? Is its regionalization even possible or not? That is a prominent question that has to be raised. Why? Because if we are agreeing with the idea that during the post-Gupta age, North India में कुछ नहीं हो रहा था, all the historical change and development was taking place in South India, first of all, we will be making certain gross oversimplifications. That means we would be overlooking all these developments that were going on during this period in North India. Secondly, इस तरह की कॉन्सेप्ट्स है ना, now with the availability of new sources, new methods, and investigative techniques, notions such as these, ये जो generalizations हैं, they are largely being found to be patently untrue. ठीक है? So they are coming under or older notions or generalizations are being discarded. ठीक है. And thirdly, this entire paradigm of strength and vigor of Indian history shifting from North India to South India following the decline of the Gupta Empire, ये किस तरह के historians के दिमाग की उपज रही होगी? Who do you think came up with this idea? Was it the recent historians or the old colonial historians? Old colonial historians, what were they trying to do? They were trying to prove that Gupta age was the last and golden age of the Hindu period. उसके बाद decline followed by the emergence of Muslim rule over North India. So they had a deliberate motive behind writing this kind of history, generalized history. So a strong colonial bias is visible in this notion, and therefore it must be taken with a grain of salt. Objectivity इसकी absolute नहीं है. And fourthly, this also tells us that before this period, before the 6th century AD, the entire historical attention was exclusively on North India. ठीक है? It is finally during this period that these people started to witness social, economic and political change in South India. But was this actually the case? No, इसके पहले भी South was politically very important. Sangam age में सातवाहनास के अंडर, महामेघवाहंस के अंडर, right? So this was not the first phase of historical activity in the Deep South. It is just that the early historians were late to realize or recognize the contributions of the South for shaping Indian history and Indian culture. So a strong North-centric bias is rooted within this historical interpretation. Therefore, it also must be discarded. Now, question आता है structuring का. If the question is the strength and vigor of Indian history between 500 and 750 CE lay south of the Vindhyas, discuss critically. तो सबसे पहले क्या करना चाहिए, उसके बाद क्या करना चाहिए, एंड कंक्लूजन किस पॉइंट पे करना चाहिए, शुरुआत कहां से करनी चाहिए? अरे साउथ से तो करोगे ही, बट पहले किसके बारे में बात करनी चाहिए? शुड यू टॉक इन फेवर ऑफ दिस आर्ग्यूमेंट और शुड यू टॉक अगेंस्ट दिस आर्ग्यूमेंट? पहले इन फेवर ऑफ, फिर उसके बाद काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट्स हो गए, ये जो हमने बताया है, एंड देन कंक्लूजन, ये जो कंसेप्चुअल क्रिटिक कंडक्ट किया है इसका, कि ये पैराडाइम ही भाई बेकार है, बकवास है, इसमें कई सारे फ्लॉज हैं पहले से. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया क्रिटिसिज्म. एक पॉइंट पे आप लिखोगे दैट रीसेंट हिस्टोरियोग्राफी ने इसको चैलेंज करा हुआ है, बट ये जो वहां पे एक वो भी देना पड़ेगा कि अगर केवल डिस्कस आता है, बट ये जो पैराडाइम है, दिस एटलीस्ट सुपरफिशियली अपीयर्स टू बी वैलिड, क्योंकि साउथ इंडिया में एक्चुअली कई सारे डेवलपमेंट्स हो रहे थे जो कि नॉर्थ में नहीं हो रहे थे. चीफ अमंग देम वर the emergence of Tamil Bhakti, second urbanization, new state formation and a new method of state formation also. ठीक है, तो सोशल एंड कल्चरल चेंज भी हो रहा था, न्यू तमिल आइडेंटिटी भी इमर्ज हो रहा था, राइट? सो ऑल दोस थिंग्स यू नीड टू मेंशन. नॉर्थ इंडिया में ऐसा नहीं चल रहा था. तो ये हो गया द इंट्रोडक्शन. नेक्स्ट, गिव द हेडिंग स्टेट फॉर्मेशन और फैक्टर्स बिहाइंड स्टेट फॉर्मेशन. Factors behind state formation. This we have already discussed briefly. क्या क्या है ये? ये वाले फैक्टर्स, ठीक है. So write down factors behind state formation in peninsular India during the post Gupta age. लिखिए. State formation in peninsular India during this period, or during the post Gupta age, was facilitated roughly by the same factors as North India during the early Gupta age. With some changes. तो ब्रॉडली वही वाले फैक्टर्स होंगे, रीजनल वेरिएशन होगा. लेकिन लिखो 1 2 3, और सॉरी सेम पॉइंट में कंटिन्यू करो, फुल स्टॉप. these include number 1, the expansion of agriculture to fertile areas created the necessary surplus to sustain a regional state. Next point, number 2, the consolidation of political power. Was also facilitated by the ability of the rulers to expand their military control. And what made this possible? The larger surplus itself. ठीक है, पहले से दूसरा पॉइंट इंटरलिंक्ड है. नंबर 3, the growing influence of Brahmanical ideology led to the consolidation of North Indian ideals of kingship. Led to the consolidation of the ideals of, sorry, क्या लिखा है? Led to the consolidation of the North Indian ideals of kingship, which emphasized upon royal supremacy and absolutism. Full stop. Number 4, land grants played an important role in state formation by not only contributing to resource expansion when we say resource expansion, we are talking about agricultural land, that is the expansion of agriculture. So more land is under control, agricultural surplus is also going to be larger, and taxpayer base of the state is also going to rise due to the incorporation of the newly inducted tribals into mainstream society, or been transformed from hunter gatherers or shifting cultivators to full-fledged settled cultivators. Okay, so resource expansion, क्या लिखा है? What is the line that you have written? Resource expansion, but also to ideological consolidation by securing a religious and ritualistic legitimacy for the state. For the state. Who were these land grants being made to? To Brahmins and temples. Devdan or Brahmadeya land grants का जमाना था ये, right? And what was the role played by Brahmins? They were ideological leaders of the society. They were also playing a very important role in confirming the position of the rulers by performing various rituals such as Ashwamedh or Vajpaya sacrifice. So Brahmanical rituals जो थे, Aryan rituals, वो perform कर रहे थे. So in the eyes of the people, these rulers gained legitimacy. Temples were the expression of the popular sentiment. Popular sentiment religion क्या था? भक्ति, राइट? और भक्ति को एक्सप्रेस कैसे करा जाता था? थ्रू आइडल वर्शिप, थ्रू डिवोशनल डांस, ड्रामा, म्यूजिक, एटसेट्रा, पोएम्स. एंड व्हाट वाज द मेन सेंटर फॉर सच एक्टिविटीज? टेम्पल्स. तो टेम्पल्स को अगर रूलर्स बड़े बड़े लैंड ग्रांट्स दे रहे हैं, दे आर creating a closer association with the people because people are themselves connected to the temple cult. ठीक है, तो क्या लिखा है आपने? For the state. Next लिखो, number 5. The emergence of bhakti in South India. The emergence of bhakti in South India as a popular movement, acted as a medium of social integration under royal patronage. Under royal patronage. ठीक है? Now, कैसे? What was the role that bhakti performed? Bhakti was the common meeting place between royal ideology expressed within the framework of Brahmanical religion and rituals, which ascribed supreme position within the state and society to the kings and instructed the people to remain permanently obedient to them, and the popular cults, most of whom were derived from tribal religion or tribal shamanism. भक्ति इन दोनों के ओवरलैप का रिजल्ट था. क्लियर? Now, how was it able to prepare the common link between royal ideology and the popular cults and the people? Through the process of the assimilation of different gods and goddesses that were traditionally worshipped by the tribals as incarnations of Vedic gods, Brahmanical gods. ये जो umbrella है, this is the umbrella of incarnation. And what has it covered? The different representations of tribal gods and goddesses. So, Bhakti provided the common meeting place for the people as well as the royal ideology. What is the line that you have written? Under royal patronage. Sub point लिखो. Bhakti aligned the royal ideology with the popular cults through the process of assimilation of tribal gods or assimilation of tribal deities as incarnations of Brahmanical gods and the cult of idol worship and temple construction. ठीक है? These are the factors responsible for state formation in peninsular India during the post-Gupta age. Take down a question. Examine the factors responsible for state formation in Peninsular India during the post Gupta age. Full stop. Compare it with the process of state formation in India, or state formation during the post Mauryan age. (200 words, 15 marks. First portion, I think you will be able to answer if 5 factors बताने हैं, right? Second part, comparison with state formation during the post-Mauryan age. So you'll need to identify the similarities and the differences as well. Coming to the similarities, क्या देखने के लिए मिलेगा? That land grants play an important role in both cases, and so does agricultural expansion especially in the process of state formation in North India during the post-Mauryan age and in Peninsular India during the post-Gupta age. Thirdly, a crucial pillar to sustain the newly established state was the emergence of a alliance between the rulers and the priestly class. So a prince priest nexus is going to be relevant in both cases. Further, this process of state formation is also going to be accompanied with some changes to the nature of kingship. Kya? That from this period onward, in post-Gupta age in southern India and during the post-Mauryan age in northern India, the concept of divine origin of kingship is going to be emphasized upon. And finally, state formation through the process of agrarian expansion is always accompanied by the assimilation and peasantization of tribes. And thus, it is not simply a political process, rather it is a socio-economic, political as well as cultural process. तो इसके cultural impact भी पढ़ेंगे, ठीक है? For example, the emergence of bhakti and tantricism, etc. Right? ये तो हो गए similarities between the two. Now, let us talk about the dissimilarities or differences. On the one hand, we have the state formation during the post-Mauryan age. क्या देखने के लिए मिलता है? That the nexus between the prince and priestly class, उसमें what do we see? The element of uniformity or the element of diversity? Diversity. So Shakas, for example, would form an alliance with the Brahmins, Shungas with the Brahmins, Kushans with the Buddhists, Mahamegwans with the Jains, and Satvahanas once again with the Brahmins. So there is an element of religious diversity to the process of state formation during the post-Mauryan age. But during the post-Gupta age, the rulers are always going to deeply attach themselves to exclusively Brahmanism. Okay. Secondly, the process of state formation during the post-Mauryan age took place at a time when second urbanization किस stage में था? Was it in its initial stage or was it nearing its peak or at its peak? At its peak. So second urbanization or urbanization was an important factor behind the expansion of state polities or played an important role in state formation. On the other hand, south of the Vindhyas, peninsular India, during the post-Gupta age, second urbanization was in its infancy, initial stages, and the economic forces responsible for state formation were generated by not the expansion of urbanization or trade, but because of the expansion of agriculture. So agriculture rather than trade played the more important role. और urbanization conversely इस तरह से भी लिख सकते हो, played a less significant or marginal role in facilitating state formation. Thirdly, during the post-Mauryan age, especially in North India, what do we see? The emergence of foreign ruling groups. Okay? But in peninsular India, during the post-Gupta age, what do we see? That new states were being created exclusively by the indigenous groups, where foreigners did not play any major role. क्लियर है? तो ये हो गए similarities and differences between the two. Now will you be able to write this answer? Good. ये हो गया process of state formation. Now the Pallava Chalukya conflict now in reality it was caused due to material factors, right? That is economic and political factors. So basic factors included the desire to control fertile lands in order to expand resources. Why was this important? If we do not take control of these fertile lands, our neighbors are going to do so. Their resource base is going to grow. Relatively, they are going to become stronger than us, more influential than us, and could threaten our very existence. Therefore, it was also a conflict for gaining influence and power. And thirdly, land grants are going to play a very important role in this conflict. Now, why were land grants being given by the state to priests? In order to gain legitimacy and to expand the sources. But main objective was कि Brahmins का support मिल जाएगा. Legitimacy through land grants was a common feature for both Pallavas as well as Chalukyas. And Brahmins were the chief recipients of land grants. In return, they emerged as the chief source of legitimacy to the rulers. ठीक है? Now, with the passage of time, the class of Brahmin priests became more and more influential, more and more wealthy, since they were able to accumulate more and more land. And thus, as they became more influential, what are they going to do? They are going to impose their own vested interests. Are they going to discourage war or encourage war? Encourage war, even pressurize the kings to undertake war. Why? Because if the king gains more territory, even especially in the fertile regions, then more land grants are going to become available to them. So they began pressurizing the rulers to go to war. इसमें इनका vested economic interest था. ठीक है? And on the basis of these basic factors, it becomes clear that the Pallava-Chalukya conflict was effectively an economic and political conflict. So it was economic and political in nature, driven primarily by material factors. However, despite this, it appears to us in the historical consciousness to have been more of a religious and dynastic conflict. So it is actually an economic and political conflict, but it is disguised as a dynastic and religious conflict. क्या लगता है क्यों होगा ऐसा? Yes, first of all, both the Pallavas and Chalukyas maintained a distinct and strong religious identity. For example, most Chalukyas were observers of Vaishnavism, while most Pallavas were observers of Shaivism. So, in those periods, it emerged as a conflict between Vaishnavism and Shaivism. Further, even though while some Pallavas were supporters of Vaishnavism, and within their kingdom they did not discriminate against Vaishnavism, they equally patronized both Shaivism and Vaishnavism, and vice versa is also true for the Chalukyas also. लेकिन जो रीजनल एक्सप्रेशन है चालुक्यन वैष्णविज्म और शैविज्म का, that is going to be extremely different as compared to Pallava Vaishnavism and Shaivism. And this was due to the regionalization of bhakti during this period. So Deccan का भक्ति अलग होगा, साउथ इंडिया तमिल भक्ति अलग होगा. Second reason, Tamil bhakti especially the Tamil bhakti of the earlier period, element क्या है इसके, features क्या है? It is characterized by excessive intense devotionalism, right? That there is so much love for God that you reject all other gods and goddesses, right? So what is going to be their attitude towards religious cults which are not the same as their own? Hostile honge. So there is an element of militancy and hostility towards other cults. And how is Tamil Bhakti going to look at others as outsiders, as impure, something that must be overcome, defeated, right? And Chalukyas are also going to respond likewise. Thirdly, one reason for this conflict taking on the shape of a dynastic conflict was that it was not resolved quickly. Okay, it lingered for a long period, right? So as a result, we witnessed successive cycles of humiliation, loss of prestige, and then badla against it, vendetta, humiliation, and vengeance. So it became the inherited legacy of all Chalukyan and Pallava rulers to destroy or to weaken their opponents. ठीक है, इतने लंबे समय तक लड़ रहे थे कि और सब कुछ भूल गए. It became part of their identity, royal identity itself. So conflict became part of their identity itself. ठीक है. So this was the nature of the conflict between the two. Now, इसका डिक्टेशन हम नेक्स्ट क्लास में रखते हैं, ठीक है? ऑलराइट, एनी डाउट्स? समझ में आया है अभी तक जो कवर किया है? चलिए देन, थैंक यू फॉर योर टाइम. आई विल सी यू इन आवर नेक्स्ट लेक्चर.